Hey guys, T from Third Phase here. Been awesome catching up with the boys on Phase 2. During this episode, we caught up and discussed our journey so far, reactions, feedback, how much it's meant to us. We also talked about something quite topical at the moment, mental health in and around rugby, and then also our thoughts on the Rugby World Cup. But thanks for tuning in. Until then, roll the tape.
Hey, it's Carl here from Third Phase. The boys are back. I come from London, here in Leamington Spa. Just come back from the airport. We've picked up teas, come all the way in from Dublin.
What up?
It is just past 2:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. So some of the challenges we're having to face
Sorry, boys.
as part of our podcast is that we all live in very different parts of the country. Well, T in a whole other country in Ireland. And I live about 2 hours away from Lima's house here in the Midlands in Leamington Spa. But we've decided to do this, so it's something we're committed to keep doing. Now episode 2, so we've had what I felt anyways, really good reactions, really good support, and a really good number of listens over our first episode. Your guys' feedback, what have you had thought so far from the first episode?
Yeah, to be honest, I've had some pretty quality feedback. A lot of the boys have said that they really enjoyed that it was just general conversation, that it was almost like they were talking to their own mates, and that what we talked about is a lot of the stuff that they talk about, and people who aren't involved in rugby or high performance sport seem to resonate with what we were talking about, and how three mates just want to get together and have fun and see where it goes, and if it fucks out, it fucks out, and if we dog shit, then like so be it. But for me, and the way I look at it is, I look at it as 3 Kiwi boys who have decided to move to the other side of the world, growing up together, going to the same school together, and just trying to have a dig at something that's a little bit out of our comfort zone. And if we sort of 3 mugs can have a crack at something, then maybe other guys like us can have a crack at what they want to have a crack at.
Absolutely. I think on the back of that, Soppers, one of the cool things for me personally is I've been working in a corporate environment since I was 19, and I've always worked for someone where this is my first project, where this is mine or ours, and we can do with it what we like, and we can put it out, and we have control of its own destiny. I think that's been a really cool aspect, and do it with 2 of your best mates. But then, just on the back of that, the feedback that we've got has been unreal. Like, I suppose when we dropped our first photo, there was a bit of traction there, and it was like, okay, can we execute? And we probably, I don't know, half executed. But, it had a really good reception on the first episode, particularly around the banter side of things, and just I suppose the way we resonated with people has been pretty awesome, pretty satisfying, and hopefully we can keep it going.
I think from me, what I like about it, coming from sort of professional rugby and being involved for 10 years, is that a lot of the time it goes fan to media, media to player, player back to media, and then the media can spin it whichever way they want. But with this, we get to control the narrative, and we can talk about things that we actually feel passionate about. And, we might not have all the right answers, but we can find those answers either through bringing guys in on the podcast or just learning on the go. This is kind of I'd say our second actual crack at it, and where this goes, who knows? But like my mate over here says, is 9 podcasts is the goal, and if we can get there, then that's a small.
Where did that come from, Carl?
So what? This is when we first starting and googling what makes a good podcast. Essentially, podcast 101 really, and one of them points was saying most podcasts don't go beyond 8 episodes. So for us, we've set a 9-goal episode. Over however long that takes, we will get there some point, some way. But part of that, and just touching on your point quickly, Lima, is this platform. I think it's that long form platform and the difficulty in press conferences particularly, you give a player or anyone in any profession short time to answer a question, and sometimes a really complex question, you can't get anything out. It's difficult to gather anyone's character or personality when you only give, but when you allow these platforms in a long, give someone an hour, you really start to understand people. Also, you just get to have, kind of have a nuanced answer where the answer can go down different tracks, but also understand people. So you're seeing a lot more of these platforms. So, we're not the first. We're definitely not going to be the last around these types of platforms. These fan to media or fan to player. I still think there is a space for media, but in the traditional sense, it will be challenged by things like this. And I think we were saying before, when a lot of media do the same thing, you will get the same. You've got to get the same result, right? And that's cliche, but that is a lot of that is the issue somewhat in that space. So, however, for us in this podcast, it's understanding what is our intention. So it's setting our intentions. When we've talked about that, what we want to get out of this podcast, and make sure it continues to be a podcast that we would listen to ourselves, even if it wasn't us. That it's, and then also, where is the saying, but still saying really genuine around that. So, even if it's only our parents that listen to it, that it's still something that we would be happy as a product to put out there, regardless of who's listening to it.
100%. And I think the key around third phase, there are so many different stories that go into a human being's life, not just a rugby player, but a human being's, and to give a safe platform where people can communicate that or talk about their challenges or how they've overcome them, or whether it's being a Polynesian growing up in an English environment or whatever it may be, where they feel they have a safe enough platform, but also a space where they can actually create change and potentially create movement. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot more professional sportsmen jump on podcasts. You look at Adi Savia, Ice Project and things like that. I think you're seeing a lot more trend towards that movement because people are trying to take it into their own hands rather than let someone else, I suppose, write their own story. People are now starting to write their stories themselves, and I think that's a really cool part of what we can do, but also for our guests and for our audience is to create that immediate link between their story and potentially how the audience can resonate or how they can take principles and adapt that to their own lifestyle potentially.
Yeah, and for me, what I find with this podcast, and if we get one guest, 10 guests, no guests, whatever it is that we actually control the narrative. So like if we sit down with someone like, for example, Jeffrey Taumaga Allen, who's just started the club, and we do an hour episode with him and then we send it to him and he's like, oh, you know what, at 10-minute mark, I want that out. At 12-minute mark, I want that out. At 13-minute, like, I want that out. And for us, I believe that our strength will come from not trying to have these clickbait headlines where he said one or two things and we've gone with this massive headline, but it actually has nothing to do with what he's actually said in the context of it. And we talked about it before in terms of the Allen Iverson analogy. You know what I mean? And how he talks about practice, and everybody's like, I'm talking about practice, and that just blows up. But what they don't actually tell the audience is that they take that little snippet and they blow it up into what they want it to be blown up as. But if you actually know the backstory of why he's so frustrated and why he doesn't believe he needs to be talking about that, then, the story gets lost.
And probably actually one of the big lessons I found was we had the episode ready in between the episode being recorded and actually releasing it. It took a while. Part of that for me personally was almost editing it. And to be fair, even after listening to it after it was released, it still wasn't perfectly edited and still learning on the fly. But there's almost a reluctancy because you think, oh man, what is everyone going to think about this when, and you have this fear, and crippling's not the right word, but it was feel this sense of, oh man, like, what is everyone going to feel?
Yeah.
And it's almost the fear of fear itself.
And I was the
issue,
same
right?
when you sent it out to us, like the first edit, and I was like, and I would listen over like 10-second cycles of just one little bit, and I'd be like, oh, well, does that sound right? Do you think people, like, it's 10 seconds of an hour piece of content, like no one's really going to pick up on that, you know? But in my head, because it's, and I think that comes back to my point around, like, it's your own thing and you're putting that out there, so you have that real, like, desire to see it succeed. But yeah, it's, man, it's, you almost, yeah, it's like fear of,
yeah, it's fear, and you almost, you get really anxious, right? And then it goes out, and then you realize there was an overwhelming support, you know, in either level, at all different levels. But we've all got love and support and feedback. I think that's I think, you know, when it's genuine, you know, it wasn't harsh feedback. It was, and people telling us things we knew, but also things we didn't think about.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things we noticed a lot, and we've done in that, which you can't really edit out, was a lot we talked over each other too much. We didn't allow stories to flourish a bit, saying a lot of ums and ahs. You know,
ums and ahs were the worst. Yeah,
all
these
things.
verbal cues.
Yeah. But we know that we won't solve these overnight, because, you know, we don't do this for a job. This is something that we'll get better on as time goes on. But part of that, setting our intention of that. So when we talk, understanding, do we want this to be a rugby-based podcast, something we all love, but going, yes, we do want it to be a rugby podcast, but also we want it to allow it that we will talk about other things. You know, we've discussed some of the guests that we look to have on, who we, you know, almost our wish list. We won't get all of them, obviously, but where we want our direction. Yes, we want rugby players on here, but we want them to allow them to be themselves too. We want Lima Sopoaga, the father, the friend, the sports fan, but also is an All Black, but rather than Lima, the All Black, the Wasp player, full stop. Yeah, so I think that's the intention we want from it. When we do have any person, that it's their story,
it's their journey, essentially.
Their journey. Yeah, for sure. That's great.
Absolutely.
Great. You know, we've talked about that. You know, they may not even like rugby. But we really want to have them on, and I think it's a level that we can get to understand, I think. So yeah, it's been good.
Just cutting in here, if you could have one person on this podcast, any person, doesn't have to be, you know, someone you have access to, but who would it be? Like, if you could have one person come and sit, you know, like, obviously we've got 3 mics, we've got a spare mic. Who's the person you would give your left nut for to get on the podcast?
T, you can go first on this one.
I think mine would be Roger Federer.
For what reason?
Well, Roger came on he played his first Wimbledon, I think, when he was 17, and he was a real hothead, aggressive player, and then he transformed himself into this calm, composed player of all strokes, many strengths, but then also his life off the court. Like, he's never had any blemishes, like he's never had any issue, like he's been a constant role model, constant version of success, and he's continually got better. Like, even at 38, like, how do you find motivation? How do you stay at the top for so long, or stay within that realm? I don't know, I'm extremely attracted. As a sportsman, as someone who, I think his mental approach to things would be really interesting. And I think the way he's been, I just think to tap into his mental approach to, particularly an individual sport where self-talk is so important, and the way, like, staying concentrated, particularly in moments of adversity or pressure moments. And quite often he's crumbled, but he's come through on a few occasions. I just think that'd be quite interesting.
Carl?
One of the ones we actually talked about was Nick R4, wasn't it? So we were talking about Nick R4. For those who don't know, he played in NZ schools. I think he was even under 20s possibly for New Zealand.
I think he went to either Kings or Grammar.
Yeah, so Auckland boy. And then I think injury stopped his rugby career there. Went on, was and a great singer and performer. Ended up singing for the All Blacks a few times, singing the national anthem for New Zealand a number of times. And then now he's gone on to become a stage performer, performing The Lion King into London on the West End, which is the pinnacle of theatre. But for someone like that, that's a really different route. And you know, Lion King is the highest grossing theatre show of all time, so it's no joke in terms of who they would pick. So I think it's someone who's, I think for me, it's someone out who's Polynesian, so he looks like me. He doesn't look like me because he's got about 16 abs on him, so so not close. But it's in a different realm, I think. So there is, I obviously love rugby, but we have a ton of Polynesian role models in that space. So great. and I love that, and I love that we continue to do that because it's an avenue for that. But also, it's so important that we have more and I know he's a really proud Samoan. He's still really I don't know him, but I know he's still really proud of that culture, even while here in London, which it is difficult because, I think I've been called either Mexican or Filipino or anything but Polynesian in my time living in London. My 3 years in London, that's a really cool someone that's in that different space and allowed to be there and allowed to be in that perform in what is one of the greatest stages in the world. That it's hard to answer because I probably have 100 people I'd like to interview, to putting it into one person. I think in terms of the person we've been speaking about lately, around guys who aren't necessarily in that rugby space, who aren't playing rugby anymore, but obviously he had a love for rugby, or has a love for rugby, but they are doing different things. So it's just understanding what makes you tick, what makes you get up and do. Be Simba. It's only one day they have off, I think. That show sometimes twice a day. So what makes you get up and be able to sing the same songs and sing "I Just Want to Be King," 10 times a week with the same vigor.
Yeah,
and with the same performance and keep in shape like he does.
Mate, have you seen him when he comes? Have you seen him when he comes out in live?
Yeah, Renee's been in watching. She came back with love in her eyes, I think. So that's difficult.
Mate, he comes out. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger chest. You just want to do push-ups every night.
Yeah. So
what about you, Sops?
It's a tough one, eh? If I could pick two, which I know I said one.
I
I know.
Change the goalpost.
I know. So
Or move the goalpost.
yeah. Honourable mention. How about that? I'll just honourable mention. I'd definitely like Sonny Bill Williams on here for obvious reasons. There's there's a mate. You could probably do 3, 4, 5 podcasts on him in a session. I think so.
100%.
But if it wasn't him and I couldn't, I didn't choose him, I think I would go with someone like Serena Williams. For me personally, I like what she stands for. I like how she stands for women's rights and her story, where she's come from. Like she got taught by her dad, never played tennis. She's from Compton. Her sister got killed in a drive-by. Those adversities to come over the top and be arguably the greatest tennis player of all time. Mm-hmm. African-American, in a sport that's...
in a predominantly white sport.
Yeah, exactly. So I think someone like that would have some pretty amazing stories around her life and just where she's come from and the impact of coming from a low socio-economic kind of area, and how her and her sister arguably top 10 players of all time,
Yeah.
So I think I'd like to get her on, but
maybe episode 7.
Yeah.
It was all a dream, man.
Yeah, do you think we can get her within the 9 episodes they'll be here? What do you think they share?
I think there's all links, and particularly with these people, there's been moments of adversity or career-defining moments, and they've been able to move past those, but then also use those experiences to successfully impact society as well. I think touching on it, even it's Mental Health Week in New Zealand, and in the Rugby World Cup, you're seeing more and more rugby players step out of the shadows in terms of shining a bit of a light on maybe I wouldn't say it's a stigma around rugby or anything, but there's probably an unspoken truth that there are a lot of the pressures of rugby. You would know, Sops, a lot, particularly in that professional environment. The pressures are massive, and that just doesn't start at a professional environment. That also starts at, particularly in the Polynesian families and Polynesian groups.
So how have you dealt with loss over your career? Because I know you won't mind me saying this, but I always felt when we were younger, you dealt with loss a lot more difficult. It affected you for a lot longer than, and not just now, but over the last few years, you've obviously really seen that change, that you've a lot longer than it does now. Almost days, if not weeks. Losses would really sit with you, and as long as I've known. But now, taken on, yes, it's a loss, but on to the next. I know we've spoken this about a number of times, even speaking about this earlier. Do you feel that, or is that just you don't notice it now? Was it?
Yeah, for me, I think it comes with age and the people you end up hanging around with, especially as you got older. So as a young kid, all you want to do is win games. You want to play as well as you can. You know, like you're reading the papers, you're reading social media, you're reading all the comments. You know, like when you play an awesome game, everyone's like, this guy's unbelievable. Like, this guy's the man. And then you play not so good game and everyone's like, fuck, who's this dickhead? Like, you know what I mean? And it comes back to actually finding a little bit of perspective and the fact that the people who make these comments online, they actually don't know you from a bar of soap. They don't know what you go through day to day. They don't know your work week. They don't know what's going on in your life. So if you put it into that perspective, like winning and losing a game doesn't actually matter to me. Like it doesn't mean, like if I've prepared well, I've given my all during the week and I know I've left no stone unturned and we still lose, it's not because I didn't prepare. And I'm the only one who knows whether or not I prepared well or not. Do you know what I mean? And if I can look myself in the mirror after a game and be like, look, you did everything you were supposed to do during the week. You stretched, you ate well, you did your extras, blah, 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 but you came up short, then it's just about taking the learnings from that game and just moving on as quickly as possible. Because if I think about it now, as I've gotten older, as I've had daughters, as I've been able to get a fiance and a family, is that really rugby is just a game. It's just a game, and there's more shit going on in the world than winning and losing a game. And that's how I see it now. Like, don't get me wrong, I will give everything I can for 80 minutes to win a game. But if I don't win the game, my daughters, when I walk through the door, they're not going to care whether their dad has won a game or not. They just want to see him and have a hug and you know, like, let's have a wrestle or you know, like, they'll come up to me and be like, oh, I want to have that lolly, and I'll just be like, oh, here, don't tell mum.
It's not almost a knock on your competitiveness, which I think that's what a lot of guys take it as. Yes, you should hate losing. There are learnings from that, I think, a little bit, and that is that's a life thing, isn't it? We all experience loss, in some bigger than others, and you'll continue to till the day you die. Just understand that, and I guess probably for you too, because you probably come from the truer side of rugby, right? Like, played rugby in kind of all corners of the earth now.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean,
I think there is definitely an added pressure being an import player, and particularly these small clubs, like you're out playing for a country club where they're looking after you, they look after your apartment, they're paid for you to fly over, and you're kind of the it guy. There is a big pressure to perform firstly, but then also to make sure the team is winning. And it's all well and good having individual performances, but if your team isn't winning, the whole reason they've invested in you is to push for promotion. So if that's not flowing through, then that pressure does weigh down on you. And I remember being in Kilkenny and it was like, shit, what's actually going on? Because we dropped our first two games, but then pushing on from that and growing from that, I think, and that was a big learning experience. But then also balancing coaching with that. It's all.
Yeah, and I guess in these small communities, sports clubs are the heart of some of these communities, right? So it really is so important to them, and it should be. And going through those wins and losses is we all face it. You know, I think it's not unique to professional sports. There will always going to be trolls on social media and all that, but I guess it becomes increasingly difficult. But it's so much better, I guess, when guys can talk about it, right? So, you know, what we've been discussing over the last week is the Tamalo documentary, which was released, I think, last week, featuring Rodney Ayu. So if you haven't watched that, please get onto YouTube, type Tamalo documentary. It's a short film with Rodney really sharing his story. So really, really powerful story from Rodney, and I'm sure it was not easy to sit down and share that story, because it is, you know, and being Polynesian, it's a really conservative culture. So it's somewhere where that's not really so open to talk about his fight with depression, his self-worth, which he questioned through that time, his questioning around his family, which is not easy, but also the pressure he had of being a rugby player from his network, particularly his father. And it's so difficult because you think, he made the Canterbury team, it was, I think, and then, anyone you think, that's in terms of the team he was playing for, in terms of the players he was playing with, success written all over it, that you'd be happy days. But it's a Polynesian community that I love, and I'm so proud to be part of that. But it's also that I know that it is not unique. It is not the only story of that. There is more of that. But by Rodney being able to share that story, you look at Rodney, 100 plus kgs, big boy. You think, nothing must ever face him, right? But for him to be able to be vulnerable, be able to say that, be beyond powerful. So, I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, for me personally, I think it was very emotional. It was a very emotional watch for a few things. One is that rugby players especially don't open up. Rugby's a tough sport. It's a sport where, you see guys getting gashes on the head and, they walk straight back out on the field because they're meant to be gladiators and they're meant to be, strong and fast and fit, and they're meant to have it all together. But I think sometimes what fans forget is that rugby players are just normal human beings. Like we love to have a beer, we love to have a punt, like we love to hanging out with our mates, like we love going on a stag do. I think it can be refreshing knowing, like fans knowing that rugby players do things exactly like people who work a 9 to 5. And what I took away from that documentary was that, it's okay to be different as a rugby player. Like it's okay to want to share your feelings, and it's okay not to be okay as well. Like for a lot of people, they see the glitz and the glamour, they see the travel, business class, they see the free gear, they see the money, and for a lot of people they're like, oh man, you're getting paid so much money to do a job you love, and yeah, you get to do a job you love and things like that. But also, if you look at Rodney's story, he's got 5 kids, a wife, away from all the comforts of home, no family over here. Imagine moving sort of 30,000 miles away from your home, where it takes 30 plus hours to get home and see your family, and you're only, all you have is each other. So yeah, I take so much strength from that documentary to say that, like it can be done, and you've just got to be willing. If you are feeling down, if, chips aren't falling your way and the bounce of the ball isn't going where you want it to go, that these things will pass. And I think that's a story. That's a story of perseverance. That's a story of someone that was willing to not give up and keep going. And he's made a fantastic career in the Northern Hemisphere. Like for a lot of kids, they just see New Zealand as a way to make their career great. But guys have come over this side of the world. I look at guys like, Rodney, who's played for Ireland. You got Bundy Aki. You got James Lowe knocking on the door of Ireland eventually. You've got Willis Halaholo looking to play for Wales. You've got Hadley Parks. You've got so many players who have come over here and taken the opportunity and flourished, and they probably at some point have gone through hard times and managed to get through it by, like you said, Carl, being vulnerable and talking. And everybody has their bad days, but I think if you can remember that the bad days will pass and the sun will come up tomorrow, then you can only go forward. You can only go forward from there, and remember that there are worse people out in the world than you. And if you can remember to have a bit of, I'd say, a bit of gratitude for what you have, and remember that what you have now is something that this is what you wish for at one point in your life.
What I took from Rodney Ayew and his story was that it's never too late to re-engineer your thought process. Like, you can, although he's further down his track, he's well established, he's starting to forgive his father now for the challenges that they had. Like, it's never too late to change your thought process or to adapt or to, I suppose, continue learning and to continue growing. And we're seeing that within our friend groups now as well. But that was probably the biggest thing or most inspirational thing that I took away, is that he's someone who's highly successful. He's obviously got, amazing kids and a loving wife, but he's still open to changing his mindset and still accepting change in order to better himself and also to better those around him. So that was the big thing that I took away from that, and that's probably what I try and adopt a little bit while I'm in Ireland as well.
One of the things that I really started to think about was in the Polynesian community space. So Polynesian players make up about 25% of rugby players worldwide, which proportionately is unbelievable, the impact that they make on the game, but also how important they are in the game. And one of the things was, is there an unhealthy pressure to make it? Yes, any elite sport is in that. Rodney's story almost shows that a lot of that, it seems to be, are we putting a lot of pressure on our boys to make it? You have kind of thoughts on that? Or?
I think there's certain different scenarios, but I've seen both worlds of it. I've seen parents who are extremely supportive and get behind their children or their families all buy in. I've seen people really succeed, but on the other hand, like I remember playing under 12s rugby back in Wellington in New Zealand, and one of the Island boys crying in the showers because he knew he played bad, he had dropped the ball a few times, and he was going to get a hiding from his dad when he got home. Like, so there's two ends of the spectrum. But I think from a young age, it's not so much the families that put them on a pedestal, but it's also the rugby outlet. So like Wellington Rugby will jump on someone really quickly, promote them really high and say, oh, this is the next person. Everyone feeds into that, and then that adds to the pressure, and then the family realizes the opportunity around it, particularly in the lower socioeconomic areas. And that it almost turns into like it's a combined beast of multiple things. Being black and white about it, I do think there's potentially too much pressure on PI youth, particularly successful sportsmen.
Yeah, and I think it's, and so I'm first generation New Zealander. My parents moved over in the 80s. My parents come over nothing, absolutely nothing. The thing was to make some money that they would then, send back to their family. And one of the key points of that is that we look at places like Samoa. If you look at their economy, their biggest contributor to the economy is expats from overseas sending money home. So when you have these things, that you realize how crucial it is that there's so much pressure about when you do make any money, that it is important. And I've struggled with that, growing up with that, with that culture. I understand it more now that I am older. What is key, I think, in a lot of that is no one can ever understand your struggle. So, for example, is that I can never understand the struggle. My dad will always talk about it, but I can never fully understand what he's been through, because he was obviously always trying to have us have a better life than he did, and that you'll continue. Lima, you're obviously pursuing that for your children, and we will do that for ours when we do have ours, and they will never understand. And that is so difficult for that, to put someone in that position. So when that pressure builds through these communities, it is a struggle. So, and I think even my old man, he wasn't like a big loving, throughout growing up, but now he's got more than love for me, because he was working so hard. So his mind was in I just need to do everything for my family, which is, and I beyond respect for him for that, and he's one of my biggest role models for that. But sometimes that line does cross, and it's so difficult. And,
absolutely.
And there's success stories, and I know he's proud of me now. And when we were growing up, when we were young, so he's just building for us to fly, right? I can see how that is. It was only a little bit over, and it would have been too much, or a little bit. So that, I think that is. Because that story, that story is repeated over and over again, of those families, and just the pressures of not only the family you have, your children and your wife, and or husband and your home in New Zealand, but you're also providing for a family that's back in the islands. And when you're not making a lot of money, that pressure continues and builds, every single day because of it. So what's your
I suppose
what's
for you,
your
Sobs, like you're the eldest child in your family, so you've got younger siblings
one
that
of
look
six,
up to you. One of six. You're also, without blowing too much smoke, like you were a bit of a prodigy growing up, like you were the talk of the town. You were, everyone knew who you were, and that's translated now. But how did you find that pressure? Or did you feel it was too much or too little, or did you relish it, or were there, like, how did you face that mentally?
Yeah, I guess for me, the lucky thing I had was my parents always just wanted me to be happy, and they never saw rugby as a way for them to get out of their situation. So I understand why a lot of the boys send their money home all the time, and they have the pressure to perform because they know that they're essentially the breadwinners for their mum and dad. But I was lucky enough that my parents both worked, and like we weren't rich or anything by, like any stretch of the imagination, like my mum and dad worked extremely hard to give us everything that they could, and if they could have, they would have given us more. But like they had 6 kids, like 4 boys and 2 girls, and trying to pay school fees and put clothes on our backs and food on the table, like I know for them and paying a mortgage, a lot of that was a struggle. So we saw that firsthand. And a story I always come back to for me and my parents was that we used to look forward to Thursdays because that was the day that the Salvation Army would come and they would drop off bread to our house. And it wasn't like the budget bread. It was like Vogel bread. It was the good bread. And, I know for my parents, even asking for that help was a stepping stone forward, because for a lot of islanders, they don't want to ask for help. They don't want to let people know that they're struggling. And I think that has always stuck with me, and the fact that they have always said, if you need help, just ask. Yeah. And for a lot of my career, if I didn't know something on the rugby pitch, or if I wanted to learn something about the gym, or, how to get fitter or things like that, I was never afraid to go out there and just be like, hey, I don't know this. Can you help me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that fact, I'm truly and utterly grateful for my parents, because as I was coming up through my rugby journey, they never expected anything more from me. Rather, they just, like Carl said before, they just wanted me to push the envelope and push it forward.
Yeah.
And give my family and my kids the best life that they could get. And that's what they tried to do for me. And, I couldn't be more grateful for that. But I understand from, like a lot of the other boys coming through this, that they do end up becoming the breadwinner, because a lot of people see the glitz and the glamour of, Super Rugby, All Blacks, NRL, things like that. And while we do get paid a decent wicket, in terms of the money that we do get over a year or 2 years, but it's only for a short time. So you've got to be able to make that money work for you, so that when you finish the game, you're not out there digging holes. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with digging holes, but while you can, you've got to be able to maximize your opportunity. And I know sometimes I would have loved to have just kept sending money to my mum and dad, even though they've never asked for it. But I know maybe the long players to use that money to invest it, and down the track, in 10, 15 years, that money hopefully has multiplied into things that, you know, can be used for generations. And that's the way I see it. And I've been blessed with parents who haven't always expected things, but I know they know that if they needed it, they could ask. And you know, I wouldn't ever shy away from the fact of helping my mum and dad, because they're the ones who have helped me achieve my dream.
I think just on the back, that's amazing. And I think just on the back of that, your mum was actually one of the people, when you talk about whether you invest in yourself now so you can repay later or do it now, whatever. But your mum was one of the first people to say, oh, you've got to put your own life jacket on before you can save anyone else. That's what she said to me. And that's something that I've carried with me for ages now, particularly with, I suppose, we come from potentially similar situations, and that's something that I've always taken with me from wherever I go. And I think that's, I suppose, testament to the attitude that your mum has and your family has.
I think one good story I have, and it's a story I don't think this guy would mind me talking about, is my good mate Muller and the work he's done for his family, and how he's changed the way he sees his money working and what he's done for his family. So I think at the start, you know, essentially he was just, you know, become an All Black, blah, 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 blah. And then his family would just ask for money. And, you know, when, you know, he's a kid who's come from Tonga to New Zealand at 18 years old, didn't speak a drop of English. You know, 6 years later, he's in the All Blacks starting in Dunedin. And a story that's always stuck out for me when I've talked to him is the way his mind has changed over time, where originally he would just send money home, just give money, give money, give money. And it comes back to that kind of quote that you hear, and it's give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, but teach a man a fish and you can feed him for a lifetime. And what he's done is he's actually funded businesses for his family back in Tonga, and then they've had to work as well to make sure there's money coming in. So he hasn't just given them the money to, you know, pay for their power or go do the groceries. At the start he did, but then he figured out pretty quickly that that does nothing for him, because they just keep coming back. And he's actually started like a ice cream shop in his village, and I think his cousin's got a concreting business, and he bought the trucks for that. And so what he's done is he's actually empowered them to go out there and work and earn their money rather than just wait for a handout. So he's obviously given them a lift, but then the way they get the money now is they've actually got to go out there and be smart and grind, and, you know, like when they're getting their profits, like, are they reinvesting it back into their business, or are they just taking it and spending it on things that they don't really need to spend it on? So, you know, like, big ups to my man for actually deciding that there was a better way. Because, you know, the easy thing for a lot of the poly boys to do is just keep giving. But eventually, you know, this gravy train of rugby runs out, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's 2 years away, whether you get a career-ending injury, touch wood. But you know what I mean? So I think
absolutely,
when it comes to that, I think that's pretty special for a guy who's come over to New Zealand and, like I said, not spoken a drop of English, but figured out that after rugby there has to be more.
Yeah.
Well, he speaks French too, eh?
Yeah. Well,
speaks French, Tongan, English.
Man of many trades.
I think he speaks better English when he's drunk.
Yeah, and not a bad rugby player as well.
Yeah, looking forward to him actually this year.
Yeah.
Hectic.
Oh, I'm not.
Might be finally a good signing for the Wasps.
If he passes the ball.
Yeah, so on the topic of Rugby World Cup, it's been just over a week now since we've gone through the Rugby World Cup. Japanese, in my opinion, have really embraced the World Cup. It was,
Fans.
the fans, 15,000 at training runs. The crowds are absolutely amazing. Full stadiums, facilities look amazing. You're seeing all the players really embrace the culture. Somewhere, what I've loved it's somewhere different outside of the traditional nations of playing rugby, outside of the Six Nations, outside of New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. We will not grow the game if we don't embrace some of these countries. It feels somewhat that it still remains in the powerhouses of these nations. It will be for the next wee while, but it seems to be they still want to hold a grasp on that. So I think Japan's showing up. Obviously early yesterday, Japan upset Ireland, which is
massive.
Ireland,
So happy.
Your fellow countryman Titapu, Ireland being number one going into the World Cup. They were number one, ranked number one going to the World Cup. Bigger than the South African upset, the Japanese upset of South Africa in 2015.
Yeah, I think so. Particularly in this instance where it actually has an influence on where they sit within the pool. I don't know if they really thought they had a chance of making the quarters last World Cup cycle, but now they legitimately could finish top of their pool. Like if they beat Samoa and Scotland, which is a big emotional effort, I think from a skill set perspective, they're definitely capable. But from the emotional output, like whether they have the ability to get there again, but they could legit finish top of their pool, potentially knock out Scotland or Ireland. And if you look back 8 years ago, that Japan would do that. Like it's
unheard of, right?
Massive in terms of the landscape of rugby.
Oh, probably comes down to, two names, the Jamie Joe effect and Tony Brown effect, lads.
You reckon?
I just, from a personal perspective,
Mm.
I've been blessed to have played under both of them for a big part of my career. And, I take my hat off to Jamie Joe because when we started at the Highlanders, we're a bunch of, misfits, bunch of
When was this? This is going back
outcasts.
2011, right?
Yeah, 2011. So about at 2010, I think only Adam Thompson was at the club and Jimmy Cowan. So they were our only two All Blacks, and he was just like, fuck it, I'm just going to get a whole bunch of young guys who are keen and eager, and we'll just see how we go. First 2 seasons we weren't too bad, won more games than we lost. And then in 2013 we obviously brought down some pretty big heavy hitters, like we had Colin Slade, Ma'anonu, Tamati Ellison, Jose Gear,
Andrew Hoare,
Tony Woodcock, Brad Thorne. So we had
good.
we had this running joke where we were hanging out with Owen for the first 8 weeks because we were 0-8. 0-8.
Yeah, because I remember I completely forgot about that year because it was hyped, right? Because they all had troubles at their own clubs, and then it was going to be this almost like this all-star team that they built down at the Landers, and then it was not even close to that.
Mate, before the season, I was just like, boys, jump on the bandwagon, get to the tab and slam it. But, obviously we had a terrible year. And
what do you think there was a cultural, what do you think that came down to? Because you think on paper, that was probably at the time, probably the strongest team, or if not, top 2 or 3 in the Super Rugby.
Yeah, I just think we went away from, a lot of people who were in that environment said we probably went away from our values of what the Highlanders been and what we were about, kind of like working class team, togetherness. The team was bigger than everybody, but we had a whole bunch of superstars. And I'm not saying the superstars were the problem. It's just that we just didn't gel together because the Highlanders at that time were a team used to having their backs against the wall and everybody writing them off. And we went from 2 kind of not bad seasons. Like we didn't make the playoffs or anything, but heading into 2013, everyone was like, these guys are top 4, easy. And then to have that absolutely just blow up in smoke was disastrous. And then everybody was calling for Jamie Joe's head, and no one wanted him at the club. And for for the powers above to have the faith that, you know what, we'll stick with this guy and we'll see what happens. And you know, he was smart enough to bring on Tony Brown in 2014, and we made our first playoffs in 12 years. And then, you know, the year after that, it was a final at the Caton, and you know, the rest is history. So,
what do you think was the big turning point, though? So, like, you talk about you had that team full of superstars, and I suppose it's not like you take the superstars away and then you start fresh. Like, you still have to rebuild that culture. Like, what was that big turning point within the Highlanders club, I suppose, that really propelled you guys? Because that 2014 year was the first year you guys solidified yourselves, and then those next few years you went on good playoff runs and everything. Like, there was obviously a key turning point within that cycle, that, do you think? Or
yeah, I really think we went back to what it meant to play for the Highlanders and what it meant for the people, and how the team was gonna kind of combine as a unit rather than a whole bunch of individuals.
Yeah.
And I think what we got right was the balance between working hard and having fun. You know, Jamie Joe came from he came from the Laurie Mains area, like pretty old school. Like in my first couple of years, we were doing fucking down and ups for days, and like he was just freshing us, you know. And then he brought Tony Brown on board, who had just finished playing rugby, so he had that kind of rapport with the players in terms of he knew what made them tick, and he knew how to get the best out of them. And I think having sort of the hard-ass coach with the sort of new, innovative coach who understood the modern player worked perfectly.
Yeah, interesting.
And I think that was the catalyst for change. And it also came down to the culture. You know, Jamie Joe's very good at bringing people together, and Tony Brown's also very, very good at getting every ounce of talent out of a player, even though he's not the most talented player, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know, kind of like at the Melbourne Storm. If you look at the Melbourne Storm, they're like a team, but the players that go there have come from other teams.
Perceived offcuts of teams.
Exactly.
And they go on to do really well, yeah.
And he understands how to get the most, you know, like he really knows how to squeeze the lemon out of every single player and get the most out of their talent.
So do you think, just kind of going back to the World Cup, do you think that's what he's brought out of this Japan, or they both have? And I have to give a little bit of credit to Eddie Jones. He left them, you know, kind of after their World Cup, and then it was really required these guys to really continue that momentum on from that. I couldn't name for the life of me one of the, you know, if you put a gun to my head, I wouldn't, before the game today or before the World Cup, maybe one I could think of.
The most important player, Fumiaki, brother.
Oh, of course, Tanaka. But, you know, that also shows the level of that it is not a team of superstars. You know, there's not one single player who's out and out the guy who's going to, lack of a better word, be the top point for the World Cup for Japan. But it seems, you know, today they were, just to see them play today, it was no fluke. You know, the way they went out today, it was dominated Ireland a lot of those minutes in the game today.
Yeah, I'd love to know what Jamie Joe said to them before the game. Some of his speeches have been like next level.
How's it?
Like you just run out there and be like, "Fuck, I want to like, you know, like
to die today."
Yeah. Like,
Jamie Joe was saying, he's like, you know, we've been playing this game for 2 years now. They've been playing for us since Monday.
Yeah.
So
that is a brilliant quote.
And just in terms of going back to what you're saying around Tony Brown gets the best maybe out of the skill set side of things, and Jamie Joseph was old school in terms of the conditioning, like, not to get too analytical, but Japan were going 13 plus phases in a lot of their periods of play, and I think their time with ball in hand was through the roof. But their ability to hold on to the ball was like the endurance side of things, but then to maintain possession and be constructive with it is Tony Brown as well, I think. And that's like, yeah, massive kudos to them. And what they did today, Islanders' world-renowned defense, they made them look pretty fucking useless.
Pretty average, yeah.
Yeah, when I watched it, I was like, far. It was like I was watching a mirror image of somewhere I had already been. Like, it just had Jamie Joe and, you know, T Brown all over it.
Yeah.
And it just made me think, like, those guys really know how to muster every little bit of talent, every little bit of work out of their players, even though on paper, you know, like Ireland beat them to the punch in that starting 15, like 14 times out of 15, you know what I mean? Like, and it's a credit to the way they coach as a unit, because I just think when you play for those two, you realise how much they believe in you. You realise how much they're on your side, and you're just willing to run for a brick wall. And you go out there,
doesn't it? Like,
you go out there free. You go out there like just ready to go. And one thing that's always stuck with me from Tony Brown, he's always said PTT, and all that means is pull the trigger. Like, don't be afraid to if you get the ball inside your 22 and you want to throw a miss pass and you think it's on, just fucking do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, don't be like brain dead and just be like, oh, I got a kick here. Like, if you think it's on and you want to have a crack, like, just do it and then deal with the consequences later.
It's actually been getting me into a bit of trouble with our club at the moment.
How so?
No, we just have a policy of all kickoffs work to the 15 box kick, and I'm just like, fuck that, like, calling for the halfback ball. First game I tried to throw like a big miss pass, forward pass, like scrum down on our 22. The poor execution, but it was on.
Yeah.
But no, just like, I'm very much orientated towards pull the trigger type mentality, whereas I think I've noticed being on this side of the world it's extremely reserved in terms of
structure.
Well, not even so much structure. Like, it's not that they play with structure. It's just that you're in the 22, you have to kick it.
This is what.
That's what the cliche is.
Yeah. Will we see a miss ball from you ever again? Or if it's on, yeah.
Yeah.
Bit of show and go.
Few shows, not much go.
Show and slow.
I read it.
So it would be silly to talk about the World Cup and not talk about the All Blacks. So we're a week on, big performance last week against South Africa, but unfortunately, which now means we will likely play Ireland in the quarterfinal. But you got at some point you do play hard teams at a World Cup, so that's the reality of that. But last week, 3-2-1. Your thoughts? For you? Well, I think 3 for me is probably
go Artie 3 maybe. Without being too biased, I know he's our top boy, but
I think I'm picking Artie on a 3. 2, I'm picking Bodie.
Bodie for sure.
Yeah, he was right up there.
In a 1, I actually really enjoyed the performance of Kieran Reid.
I thought Scott Barrett was big. Thought Anton was big.
Oh yeah,
Albie.
Anton was massive. Anton was.
Mate, you love him though.
Legit man crush. He's fucking good.
Is that your man crush?
Albie, like, in terms of his centre skill set, he's
Do you reckon you're like a poor man's version of Anton?
probably a bit faster. No. Yeah, definitely poor man. If Albie had a long ball on him.
Mate, you got to get a freaking wrench to get that ball out of his hands.
I know, that's
Hans Hungus.
show and go king.
Yeah, he's a show with plenty more.
Yeah, so I thought he was massive, and it almost felt like he was, before going into that World Cup, was kind of your coming off the bench, if not even in the 23, and then now he's probably the guy now, right? At the moment,
the press conferences even said so as well.
It's hard to say. How do you not book him now as your starting centre, outside centre? So yeah, I think he's been massive. Yeah, but again, I always find these World Cups that All Blacks can be. Well, now they've got fairly regular teams going in, and not to underestimate them, but I think it'll be comfortable for the boys.
I think you got to give massive kudos to South Africa. They came to absolutely play, and fuck that Cheslin Colby, little bastard.
Bro,
he is
lightning as well.
He's lightning. I felt that freaking little.
What
weasel.
do you think it is? Because you see a lot of the little jinky guys, but he seems to have quite a lot of power as well. Like
I think he benches like 150, 160.
Really?
Yeah, so he looks small, but he's powerful.
Yeah. But yeah, bro, he tore us to shreds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was pretty solid, eh?
And South Africa's rush defense as well. Like I thought we scored well in transition. Like those 2 tries we scored were in transition, but in terms of actually constructing tries off phase play, I don't think. My memory's a bit short, but I'm not sure if we actually did that with
the All Blacks. No, not really. But just going back to Artie, some of the turnovers he was making in crucial moments in the 22.
Mate, that man has got a large heart, eh? He's got some ticker on him, mate. Honestly. Like, particularly, even for the Canes before we got into the All Blacks.
His engine is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And we're not plugging him because you are wearing his T-shirt as well. So.
Thanks, odds. Cheers, brass. Appreciate it.
Yeah, but no,
quality's not that great. But, the message. It's about the message, man.
But otherwise, really looking forward to this World Cup. Who are you saying?
I don't know, bro. I don't care as long as New Zealand are in there. But I'd like to see some of the Tier 2 nations carve up and get a fair crack, to be honest.
Yeah.
What do you mean in terms of fair crack?
Mate, that blatant shoulder charge today, Argentina versus Tonga, that's a fucking disgrace.
Yeah, I can't say I saw it. So
to miss that. If there was a Tongan dude, straight red card.
Do you reckon?
100%. Oh, straight up. What's the linesman looking at? He's just looking straight at him. That's just...
Also, no card at all?
No card at all, no penalty, no nothing, just out. Like, come on, man. Come on, bro.
What do you think in terms of the scheduling from like the top tier nations to the lower tier nations?
Yeah, well, everybody's got a short schedule, but if you look at it, if you look at the scheduling, like the tier 1 nations, when they're on the short schedule, they're playing the tier 2 nations. It's not like they're playing tier 1 nations back to back, or it's, I think at the last World Cup, I think Fiji played Aussie and then 4 days later they played England or something like that.
Yeah.
Or the other way around or something. So it is hard for the tier 2 nations, like big ups to Uruguay. Like that was an awesome win for them, but I do feel sorry for all the tier 2 nations. And that's me personally. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, whatever. No one's going to agree, but I don't really care.
Yeah, no, fair.
Yeah, and I think just quickly, I know we made that post earlier this week around players who are, and we something we touched upon in the last episode briefly, players who had previously played for tier 1 nations, mostly New Zealand and Australia, who have links to the islands, who have Pacific heritage. Do you think that they should be able to play, should be representing these nations? I know there's a wider story to it, to me it seems surely it's a no-brainer for the sake of the growth of the game.
Yeah, and I think if you don't, you just have these dormant rugby players who are just playing professional rugby player in France, who are extremely high profile, have mass amounts of knowledge, and they're just sitting there making euros for some private billionaire when they could be given back to their team, their nation, their country. But I suppose, Sops, you're actually a player in that situation now. I imagine you have some pretty good insight.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to give back to the Pacific Islands, especially Samoa, or be available for that. But obviously I understand that there's limitations and there's regulations and how those get changed. I don't know. But for me, I've seen what it can do if those eligibility laws have been sort of relaxed a bit. You only have to look at teams in different codes like rugby league and what happened with Tonga and the support and the growth of the game and the knowledge that's been able to be passed on has only made the game stronger. And whether or not people agree that it will make the game stronger, or whether or not people are afraid that that'll make the game stronger and challenge some of these, tier 1 nations. And I just think that it would just make for a better spectacle come the World Cup if more of the Tier 2 nations were able to have access to these players. Obviously, there needs to be some form of stand-down period or whatnot, and you can't just go from a Tier 1 nation to a Tier 2 back up to a Tier 1. Like, I think if you end up playing and then go and playing in yourself overseas and then go to Tier 2 and then say you go back to New Zealand, you can't be picked again for the All Blacks or things like that. I'm not too sure, but I think personally I'd love to see the game grow and see some of these players pass on their knowledge to the next generation.
And I think, some of these names, not you, but it's like with him, but these guys should be at World Cups.
100%.
Charlie Pietau is the one. I just look at him, like, I watch him. You go, he should be at the world stage, and he should be, because these are the guys who make highlights, who really show the game to people. People who don't see it, or only really pure fans can watch a whole 80-minute game, but seeing some of his highlights and what he can do and his skill set, his athleticism, and what he can bring to the game. There is not a lot of people that can do that. And there's a lot of guys in that whole team that we decided on as these guys should be there. In some form, maybe not all of them, maybe some, but how particularly when they want to be there as well, right? Some of them have said that they'd love to go back and represent their country of heritage, because they're so proud, and we all are so proud. So I think that there has to be something addressed towards that, and I think it seems everyone's just a bit precious on the whole.
I think the sevens was like a small step to be able to, but there needs to be continued movement after that to open up the eligibility doors or create a bit more leniency, if you will. But yeah, I definitely think, like, you look at the pool of talent which aren't playing in this World Cup who could be doing amazing things and imagine if in the pool games you had 3 or 4 competitive teams, like the amount of traction or amount of audience or the hype that would get, from it. And just in terms of a product for consumers, like, that's massive.
And I think the other reality though and this is particularly with French clubs who hold a lot of these players for ransom, right? So either they are currently playing for and a lot of the French clubs are guilty for this, where they want to go then represent their a Tier 2 nation. The clubs will either restrict their pay, cut their pay when they do go away on overseas tours. So not only are these players in most cases funding their trip to get over to Auckland or wherever they need to get to, then they're getting their pay cut from their French club, who are the 99% of the money, if not 100% of the money they're making a year, and so a lot of players I know are still in France, not left to the World Cup because they know it's going to affect their money, and you can't blame them. You cannot blame them for that, because they are just they have to secure the bag first. They have to support their family. And that is, you cannot knock that. But again, they should be, they were on choice for there. And I know that the island coaches don't knock them either, because they understand that that's what they face. Belgium Tutangaloa is a good example, where his contract was pulled when he told the club he was going to go to he was going to represent someone in the World Cup. They pulled his contract. Yeah, and those things just don't happen to players where they have more chips on the table. So
more leverage.
Yeah. So and so I think World Rugby's got to find a way to resolve that. Where the three of us are going to sit on the table and figure it out tonight at whatever time, nearly 5 o'clock in the morning. But
if someone doesn't come at 12 o'clock,
yeah.
There's another fine.
Yeah, we may figure it out by then. But yeah, I think raising awareness of that and talking about it, and kind of saying more people seeing that and going, these guys should be at World Cups. Then I think people go, oh yeah, they should be. Why aren't they? So I think raising those questions and putting those questions on World Rugby, and in this very close community of World Rugby, where they're just trying to get their own home nations, and fair enough, and New Zealand's guilty of that too. But it has to be where it's for as a game for everyone, really, isn't
Yeah.
it? And it should be for everyone.
Particularly if we want to transfer to this global model that they talk about so much.
Yeah. So, yeah, otherwise, I think that's probably us for the...
Well, we'll wrap it up there for tonight, boys. Been awesome having you guys here. Thanks for coming all the way to Lem. Last but not least, thank you to all our listeners who have tuned in for the first 2 phases. Been pretty cool to hear your guys' feedback. If you want to follow our journey, then hit us up on Instagram. We're at Third Phase Pod. And if there's any questions that you want to hit us up on, just DM us and we'll get back to you. But like, subscribe, share, tell your mates. That'd be really cool, and we would really appreciate that. If you like the t-shirt that I'm wearing, hit up Artie Severe Clothing on Instagram. He's got some cool clothes on there, and it'll be cool to support the bro. He's over in Japan right now doing his thing and lighting the world on fire. But until next time, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the third phase.
I said the stormy days are better, bro. Yeah. Ever since I started telling stories to the metronome, the stormy days are better, bro. Ever since I started telling stories to the metronome, the stormy days are better, bro. Yeah. Ever since I started telling stories to the metronome, the stormy days are better, bro.